Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. We're taping this show this time because my special guest, Regina Hagen, from Germany, from the Darmstadter Friedensforum, is visiting, and we couldn't get the studio in time to take advantage of her visit, so we're taping this from my house. Regina is a member of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space Board of Directors. It's an organization that I actually work for, and she's come all the way from Germany to be part of our annual conference this year, which is going to be held in Andover, Massachusetts. So we're glad to have you, Regina. Thanks for being on the show.
And thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Let's start with the issues that are close to the heart of our organization, missile defense, and also NATO and then Europe. Let's kind of work that area first. Is this issue of missile defense, first of all, what is it? All right, what is missile defense? But then secondly, in Europe, amongst the peace groups in Europe, is missile defense an issue that they're concerned about? And how does it tie into NATO and all of Europe together? So that's a big question for you to start with.
It's a big question, and I might lose part of it, so you might have to remind me. Missile defense basically means that the military would try when an adversary attacks a country, your own or another one, and shoots a missile, releases a warhead, that you launch another missile and release an interceptor which would try to run into the warhead and destroy it through sheer physical force. And it's sometimes called to hit a bullet with a bullet in space, because that's how difficult it is. And the technologies vary a little depending on the range of the attacking missile or warhead. So missile defense has been an issue basically since the Germans launched the V2 during the Second World War against London and Antwerp and other countries. And the US military has been working on missile defense ever since. But in recent times with the Bush government and now again with the Obama government, this has become very concrete again. And especially now with the Obama administration, it's actually become much more of a European issue, because what Obama plans is to deploy missile launchers both on the sea around Europe, really around Russia, in the Baltic Sea and in the Mediterranean, and to continue developing this system, which is based on ships, on Aegis destroyers, and have a land-based version, and that would be deployed in countries like Poland and Romania, and they are trying to convince Turkey to deploy these missiles. So they would be deployed in Europe, and therefore it has actually become more of an issue to the European peace movement than in the past, when the Bush missile defense was more an intercontinental thing.
These missile defense systems, one of the reasons that they're so controversial is because they've been proven that they could also function as an anti-satellite weapon to destroy a satellite. Talk about that. That's
quite true. The United States military actually used the system, the Aegis missile defense system that is being pushed by the Obama government and is to be deployed in the European waters and lands to destroy an out of control secrecy satellite. Is that the term you would use?
Military satellite.
Yeah, for reconnaissance, which was out of control, and they actually used this system to destroy the satellite. And they said they need to do so because there was still a lot of fuel in the satellite, and it could be harmful to nature and human beings. But the best guess we can really have is that it was actually to test this system And it's much easier to kill a satellite than a warhead, because a satellite has a very predictable orbit around Earth, and you have plenty of time to calculate where the exact position at an exact time, and to program your system for exactly this position, whereas a warhead would come out of the blue. So it's actually proven its capacity as an anti-satellite system, as a space weapon. And to the utter horror of many of us, China has done the same on an out-of-function satellite. And at least I don't know about military experts and maybe government experts, but I hadn't at that time been aware that China worked on a similar system, because they basically used the same technology as the US did to be used as missile defense and anti-satellite weapons.
So we're on the verge then of a new arms race, one that will now move into space, aren't we?
Well, there have always been plans to move weapons to space. I mean, famously, Ronald Reagan with his Star Wars programs. But I think technology has now advanced to a level where it's actually more feasible than it was in the past. And also it seems that the political will has changed, because back in I believe in the 60s, 70s, the US and the Soviet Union did actually do anti-satellite tests, and they had a moratorium and an agreement not to do this. But what is happening now, I think, yes, is a new level, and it makes things even. I think it becomes even worse because you not only have these weapons system, but you also have all the civilian and research and military satellites in space, and our societies have become fully dependent on these satellites, both for civilian life, like GPS. Ships no longer use the light towers on the coast, but they fully depend on GPS. But also the military, for example, for the drone warfare in Afghanistan and Pakistan, it couldn't be done without the satellites. So it's like an escalation. When you depend on something, it becomes, as Rumsfeld said back in 2001, an attractive target for adversaries to take them out and to do you real harm. That means you want to protect these satellites. Which could mean that you want even other weapons to be available to protect these satellites. So it seems like an escalation, like an arms race in space.
So just to make this clear for everyone listening, the Aegis destroyers that are built at Bath Iron Works are being outfitted with these missile defense interceptors, and we're told that they're going to be used to protect us. But what you're saying is that they have functioned and could function in the future as an offensive system that could destroy satellites in space, that they could become an anti-satellite weapon, so that in a time of hostilities, knowing that every country fights war these days with military satellites for targeting and reconnaissance and all that kind of stuff, the Aegis destroyers would be able to function as an anti-satellite weapon, knocking out other countries' satellites like China or Russia or any other country. And then this then creates a whole momentum in space, because when you blow something up in space, you create a lot of space debris or space junk that then has a multiplying effect, because it begins to smash into other satellites, and pretty soon everything just is chaos in space, where everything is crashing into everything else, and life on Earth that, as you said, is connected, totally connected to satellites now, color TVs and cell phones, cable TV and cell phones, and everything we do.
Weather forecast, communication, everything.
Banking,
trade.
Yeah, everything. So we lose, essentially, we could lose everything. The whole I don't want to sound dramatic about it, but it's true. Everything virtually on the earth could shut down because of this situation.
If it escalates, if it were actually used to a certain amount, several satellites in higher orbits being killed by ASAT, by anti-satellite weapons, which are missile defense systems, that's quite true. And actually, the anti-satellite test China did was in a much higher orbit than what the US did, and that was the result. Half of the larger pieces of space junk that are currently recorded in space are from this single incident. And the US were clever enough to wait this out of control satellite until it came closer to Earth, because then the debris falls down on Earth pretty fast. But that is a problem. But actually there is another side to this Aegis systems that, as you say, are being built here in Bath and are currently mostly deployed in Northeast Asia to protect Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and will now come closer to Europe. And that is their original purpose is to defend against attacking missiles or warheads. The Obama administration and NATO say they need this because of the Iranian missile and nuclear weapons threat. Now, Iran does have missiles with a certain range. They have no nuclear warheads and hopefully do not for a few years. But the system is going to be further developed to increase the range of the system. And that's when Russia comes into the play again, because these systems will be stationed, deployed around Russia from the Baltic through Poland and Romania and the Mediterranean and maybe even the Black Sea. And on the other side, Northeast Asia. So they really sort of encircle Russia. And then Russia is worried that when those missile defense systems get a longer range, they could actually acquire the speed that would make them capable to take down nuclear warheads from Russia. Now you'd say, why would Russia want to use nuclear warheads? They wouldn't. But that would allow the United States to do a first strike, take out Russian nukes, and the Russians could not respond with a second strike. So it would put the whole system of deterrence at stake.
At the same time that the United States is expanding these missile defense systems around Russia, as you just described, NATO is also expanding its operations, moving essentially also to encircle Russia. Now, after the Berlin Wall fell, and after the Soviet Union collapsed, the United States promised Russia that NATO would not expand, not 1 centimeter, Russia was told, by the United States. But now that promise has been broken, and NATO is expanding.
Has already expanded considerably. Many countries in former Eastern Europe.
And how is Russia responding to that?
Well, they are very worried, and that is part of what sort of erupted during the Georgia War a few years ago. Because NATO has expanded to the east towards the border of Russia by accepting the Baltic states, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, Romania into NATO, and now also other countries in former Yugoslavia. Russia is very worried about that, and I'm not that good in geography, but I think the only 2 countries left between Europe and Russia are now Georgia and Ukraine and White Russia. I think you call it Belarus. I think those are the only 3 countries not yet members to NATO. So Russia is very worried about this encircling.
How does NATO today justify its existence, especially at a time when there's an economic crisis throughout Europe? I imagine that NATO expansion, NATO operations in Afghanistan and Libya now is costing the Europeans, as it's costing the Americans, a lot of money. We're spending more than $10 billion every single month on Afghanistan. So I know Europeans are also spending a lot of money on NATO in Afghanistan and Libya. How is all this being received in Europe?
Well, it is very strange because, for example, the latest white book, the military white book of Germany says that Germany is encircled by friends and that there is no adversary in view that could...
Adversary.
Adversary,
Yes.
that could threaten Germany militarily. Yet at the same time, NATO, for which the same is basically true, released their new strategic concept this past November 2010 in Lisbon, and they had a whole list of threats they should be prepared for, which includes weapons of mass destruction proliferation, missile proliferation, modern weapons technology, terrorism, but also things like health crises, water crisis, energy supply, maintaining prosperity in our societies. So it becomes very vague, the so-called threat of NATO, which means that obviously they prepare to be military able to respond whatever is contrary to their interests, and prosperity of course also reflects the whole economic system. So that's their justification now, and that is very weird because it's a defense coalition.
Alliance.
Alliance that was originally meant to defend, to help one country defend itself when it's attacked by an outsider. That was the original reason 50 years
So
back.
NATO has become, this is the way I view it, tell me what you think. NATO has become the military arm of corporate globalization with a global mission. The US is now dragging Japan and South Korea and other countries into NATO, which is giving it this global mission. And they're using it to intervene anywhere in the world for whatever reason. Would you agree that that's what's happening?
I would certainly agree that this is happening as far as it regards the United States, with the intention, the reason for maintaining NATO, although the Soviet Union no longer exists. I'm not so sure about some of the European governments. As a whole in NATO, I would agree. I think some of the individual NATO countries in Europe, like for example Germany, when they go to wars, actually believe at least to the same amount in upkeeping human rights and protecting civilians, and ignore the rest that comes with this war fighting and all this. But when you go down from individual politicians, occasionally you might really feel this human rights issue and civilian protection issue. There is a lot of lobbying from industry, and that's when it's of course identical in Europe, because the military industry does a lot of lobbying in, for example, Berlin, our capital, and push for involvement in these wars, because then they can sell their weapon systems.
Yeah. Let's talk more about space satellites as weapons. Mm-hmm. I've heard you say in the past that space satellites have essentially become weapons because of how they guide and direct modern warfare. Can you talk more about that?
Well, I don't say that the satellites are weapons. I make a distinction and say they have become an essential part of larger weapon systems, like the system of systems, I think is sometimes called in computer talk, for example. So when we go back to the example I used earlier, the drones, the unmanned aerial vehicles used for warfighting in Afghanistan and Pakistan especially, they could not operate without satellites. The command and control goes through communication satellites. What they see with their cameras and infrared systems is relayed through satellites to the soldiers sitting in their base in America, actually. The command to launch a missile or to drop a bomb is given from America through satellites to this drone. The battle damage assessment, I think is the term you would use, which is again done with optical systems, with cameras, is relayed back through satellite to the soldier sitting in America. So this drone could not do its job without the use of a variety of satellites, including GPS also, to aim the missile, for example. So space has become a very essential part of this overall weapon system.
And for a peace activist, how do you respond to that?
Well, it might sound a little naive, but my approach is to say that at least for the satellites that are under civilian control, it would be helpful. I mean, military satellites are obviously parts of weapons anyway, and we need to attack the military system as such to tackle this issue. But another approach can be also to try to set limits to the dual use of civilian and research and scientific satellites for military purposes, and say there should be contracts that prevent military use of, for example, tax-funded research and scientific satellites. So you could set rules of the road which falls short of what's actually happening. In Geneva, there are talks about prevention of an arms race in outer space on the UN level. So this is taken very serious, and I think we must develop new treaties against space use, such as we have treaties against use of biological or chemical weapons, and aim for a treaty against nuclear weapons. We should use international law, and we should educate the public about this. Many workers in the factories don't actually know what they work on, that it's parts of weapon systems. And I think they should become aware so that they can make a deliberate decision whether they want to participate in this war system.
Also, what's happening is the universities and colleges, the computer science department, the physics department, the mathematics department, various departments that specialize in computer technology and high-tech work are being dragged into the development of a lot of this space technology as well. Can you say a word or two about that?
Which is true, and I think in the United States it has already been common for a much longer time that foundations or private corporations fund universities, professorships, institutes, and this is now also getting more common in Europe. And I can't talk about all of Europe, but in Germany there is actually now a movement developing, started by students, university students, who say we don't want to have any in this. We want universities for peace and don't want to accept such money.
We only have 5 minutes left, so let's move to the recent German decision to phase out nuclear power plants. I know that's been an exciting development in Germany, and I just heard a day or so ago that Italy has now also made that decision too. So first, give us a brief review of why your country made this historic decision on nuclear power.
Well, nuclear power has been debated in Germany for decades. There was a strong movement against the use of nuclear power because it's dangerous, it's uncontrollable. Not a single country in the world knows what to do with the nuclear waste when it's burned in the reactor. So there is many reasons for being against it, and this has been the case in Germany for decades. But then Germany, although we don't seem to be so close to the Ukraine, we are actually not that far away from Chernobyl. And I remember May 1, 1986, when the news, what happened in Chernobyl, leaked through to the media and to the public. And I had spent that day outdoors all day because May 1 is a national holiday in Germany. And afterwards we learned that the nuclear cloud from Chernobyl had gone across us and no one had warned us. So that really gave a kick to the anti-nuclear movement, and we always were aware of the dangers. And then this year, on March 11, the Fukushima disaster, developing and publicly developing
in
sort
Japan,
of,
you're talking about the
Japan,
Japanese
yeah,
accident.
Yeah, I think that boosted the anti-nuclear movement again, and it got so strong, and we had so many demonstrations with hundreds of thousands of people that actually Chancellor Merkel,
who's a conservative, right?
Who is a conservative, but she is a physicist. So she understands the issues. She understood that the mood in Germany would no longer accept nuclear power, and we had a recent plan to phase out nuclear power from the red-green government. So she picked up on that, and now we do have the decision that the last nuclear power plant will be phased out in 2012, and 8 of the oldest plants are already closed down now and will not go back in operation.
And so your country is going to make a major investment then in conservation, energy conservation, and also move to renewable energy, correct?
That is correct, and it's not only that we would start doing that now, but we are very advanced on the way. The 8 nuclear power plants that were closed down could actually be fully compensated through solar and windmills already now this year. We had a nice spring, a windy and sunny spring that helped, but all the things were in place to replace the energy that came from nuclear previously, and this will be sped up now.
It seems that some people around the world, in Germany and Italy and a few other countries, really understand this. Mm-hmm. I would wish that the American people would become so enlightened about the dangers of nuclear power and the need to invest in this technology.
Well, actually, it doesn't take enlightened people, it takes an enlightened government, regardless of people, and I'm very disappointed about Obama pushing for nuclear power. He is too clever to do that, with a good conscience. I'm very disappointed.
Well, we'll end it there. Regina Hagen, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to have you, and it'll be great to spend the next few days with you at our conference, with the Global Network Conference. And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.